Last week, we started a new series intended to help you, fellow dominants, get to the root of entitled submission with an exclusive self-assessment to determine if emotional manipulation is taking place in your dynamic and how to solve it. So if you missed part 1 of this series, I've linked it in the description below. And go over to patreon.com/LXerotica to get instant access to the full 19-point emotional manipulation test with my recommended action plans. But for our purposes today, we're looking at the links between dog training techniques and consensual behavior modification in DS dynamics and how you can apply them in your power dynamic for top-tier submissive training. The first principle I see in both dog training and submissive training is the consensual power exchange. This may seem obvious, but acknowledging the power exchange includes acknowledging that you as a submissive are at the bottom of the power gap. This includes understanding that as a submissive in a consensual power exchange relationship, you must both want to be led and allow yourself to be led. When I take my dog Jamie for our walks, he may be walking slightly in front of me, but he's not leading me. He doesn't try to rush my pace during the walk, nor does he demand his own way by trying to pull me along. And if he does have a mindless moment and starts trying to lead, I stand my ground. Literally, I stop moving. I address his behavior, call him back over to me, and make him sit next to me before I start walking again. Why? Because he needs to know that I am in control, especially when he gets distracted or disobedient. In the same way, it's important to show your submissive, especially when they're distracted, disrespectful, or disobedient, that you will enforce the arrangement that's been negotiated and agreed upon and maintain the rightful power gap. They're looking to you for this level of leadership. And acknowledging this consensual power exchange also includes a principle we touched on last week, a belief in the dominant's superiority. It's going to be very challenging for a prideful, insecure, or entitled person to truly embrace the power gap if they hold the internal belief that they're more experienced, more knowledgeable, smarter, more aware, etc. than their dominant. This is often the phase many dominants rush through to get to play, but this is where a lasting power dynamic is built on the submissive's foundational belief that the dominant is superior and their desire to yield to that superiority. Patience and trust are the next two principles I see, and I list them under the same point because I believe patience and trust are actually connected. They're actually two sides of the same coin. Think about it. When is patience required? When you want something, but you can't have it yet. Therefore, trust includes respecting no and wait. Because here's the thing. Authentic submission does not occur until you have the opportunity to yield, especially when there's a disagreement or conflict of wills. Think of it like this. You want to play every other day. You as a submissive, you want to play every other day. But your dominant says no. They can only commit to play twice a week. That right there is your opportunity to show your submission by yielding to your dominant's will, respecting the no, and being patient until playtime arrives. This is instead of getting angry, fussy, bratty, passive-aggressive, taking it personally, attaching a rejection wound to it, or otherwise trying to generate a different answer from your dominant through emotional manipulation. You had a scene scheduled for Saturday, but your dominant got the flu on Friday? Another opportunity to show your submission by yielding to the higher priority, graciously caring for your dominant, and patiently waiting for their recovery to resume your normal play schedule. For instance, I know my dog Jamie loves to go on walks. He loves them. It's a love language, all right? He doesn't need walks to survive, but I can definitely tell he's happier when we go on regular walks. So as his owner, I make it a point to take him on walks daily, as often as I can. But what about if I wake up cramping during Goddess Week, become ill, or get just swamped and overloaded with work, and I just can't take him for a walk that day? Does Jamie huff and puff and whine and pout and victimize himself and make me feel guilty because his walks are in need and now he feels neglected by me? No. He puts aside his intense desire for a walk and cuddles with me because there's now a higher priority. That's submission. By contrast, an entitled submissive would do what I just described: victimize themselves and guilt the dominant when they don't get the play they want. In a sense, entitlement reveals a lack of trust. Think about it. Entitlement reveals a lack of trust that your dominant knows what you want and will prioritize play when they can. And this lack of trust creates a sneaky control move on the submissive's part. But this is really quite simple to troubleshoot. When a submissive treats a privilege like a right, it's time to remove the privilege. When a submissive treats a privilege like a right, it's time to remove the privilege until entitlement is snuffed out by gratitude. Obedience is our next point, and an obvious one at that, but I want to illuminate that there are different forms or demonstrations of obedience. For instance, there's ongoing obedience to the rules, rituals, and protocols that have been established in your dynamic. This requires consistency, discipline, and the ability to self-motivate. But there's also responsive obedience, which is honoring a specific directive the dominant gives. Every dominant is different. Every dominant is going to prefer different expressions of submission. But I personally believe that responsive obedience should supersede ongoing obedience. And here's why. My dog Jamie knows the word home in reference to the location of the house, right? So as we're on the final stretch of our walks, I'll say, home, take me home. I want to go home. And he'll start immediately just angling and crossing the street and going right to the driveway. And it's become such a ritual on our walk that I really don't even need to command it anymore. When he gets to the Q house, he just starts to veer right over and go home. But let's say as we start to cross the street on one of our walks, a car comes zooming down the road and I command, Jamie, come, to get him to come back to me and out of danger. I would obviously want his responsive obedience in that moment to overtake his ongoing obedience of going home, right? Because I want to keep him out of harm's way. And the same thing applies in DS. The dominant's command, instruction, or request should be met with immediate responsiveness instead of programmed behavior. And here's what this does. This keeps the submissive more present. It demands that their focus stay with the dominant. It prevents mindless obedience and distraction, and it keeps the submissive experience novel, unpredictable, and therefore more exciting. Setting and respecting boundaries is crucial in power exchange dynamics, including negotiation, enthusiastic consent, hard and soft limits, and safe words. These all reflect the necessity of boundaries in DS relationships. But here's the often overlooked point about boundaries. Boundaries protect pleasure. Think about it. If boundaries don't prevent you from love, but protect you for love, if boundaries are an act of honoring the autonomy in yourself and others, if boundaries are the healthy alternative to control and manipulation, then what should remain within the confines of your boundaries? What should remain? The things that bring you joy, the things that make you feel safe, the things that bring you pleasure and connection. And this should include the people with whom you can trust and feel safe, the people that you can be vulnerable around, the people that you can be intimate and expressive with. Boundaries protect pleasure. And dominance, it's a great act of love and leadership to set boundaries with your submissive, because boundaries also prevent bitterness. Boundaries protect pleasure, but they also prevent bitterness. When I first got my baby Jamie, I determined that as my pet, he exists in my life for my pleasure. Now, I know that sounds a little savage, but stay with me. I acknowledge that he has great value. I acknowledge that he deserves to be treated with tremendous love and care. However, I did not choose to adopt a pet to make my life more difficult. I did not choose to adopt a pet to make my life more difficult, stressful, or overwhelming. I chose to adopt a pet to have companionship, laughter, and joy. And as his owner, it's my responsibility through mindful boundaries and consistent reinforcement to facilitate the structure in which that can be built. That's why I've spent so much time training him and teaching him what is and is not allowed, what pleases me, and what will create distance between us. But if you feel like your submissive just isn't responding to your leadership, no matter what you do or how consistent you are, you don't want to miss my new submissive training bundle on Patreon. This resource contains 8 exclusive downloads, including 3 brand new guides: a dominance guide to deepen devotion, a dominance guide to tackling trauma triggers, and 8 dog training techniques for effective behavior modification. Just go over to patreon.com/LXerotica to get instant access. And be sure you're subscribed and have those notifications turned on, because next week we're continuing our deep dive into these overlapping principles between dominance and dog training.